Quer desenvolver os talentos da sua equipe e potencializar os resultados da sua empresa? Conte com a expertise do atendimento corporativo do Senac São Paulo, que já capacitou mais de 1 milhão de pessoas e profissionais de instituições públicas, privadas e terceiro setor. Construa uma equipe altamente motivada e capacitada e destaque-se no mercado. Entre em contato, acesse sp.senac.br/corporativo e saiba mais. Quer saber? Senac. Enquanto você curte um som, a ClearSale cuida da segurança antifraude de mais de 100 mil empresas em todo o mundo. Só falta a sua. Fale com os nossos especialistas e fique um passo à frente das fraudes e riscos de crédito. Encontre soluções flexíveis que se adaptam às necessidades da sua empresa e garanta múltiplas camadas de proteção em cada transação. ClearSale, one step ahead.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, one of our city's most iconic landmarks is celebrating its golden anniversary. And COVID cases are up, but new vaccines aren't quite ready. We're looking back at both national conventions to see how Pennsylvanians talked about Pittsburgh area issues. And Giant Eagle is dropping GetGo, but another bird is swooping in. It's August 23rd, the Friday News Roundup. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm with CityCast producers Mallory Falk and Sophia Lowe, talking about Pittsburgh's biggest, or maybe just most interesting to us, news this week. How are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Not bad. Mallory, are you doing okay?
Yeah, doing all right over here.
It's always funny when we record these, everyone like in the closet hanging out. It's a funny way to hanging
out with our ball gowns.
It's a funny way to engage with your coworkers. Yeah. So we're going to jump right in with one of our favorite topics, grocery store news.
Yes, earlier this week, Giant Eagle decided to sell GetGo to a Canadian company that's focused specifically on convenience stores. But for everyone worried about the MyPerks loyalty program, do not fret. That'll stick around and potentially even expand its benefits.
But Megan, I know the thing that really got you interested in this story was the name of the Canadian company that's going to own GetGo now.
It's just so silly sounding.
Couche-tard. I love saying it.
It just sounds like an insult, like a really inappropriate one. Is that actually how you say it? I'm realizing I've only seen the name in writing and not heard it spoken out loud, but that is how I was imagining it in my head.
It's not at all how I imagined it. But Sophie and I did look this up and found several news stories, and that's how everyone seems to be pronouncing it. I just don't think there's like a dignified way to say those syllables in American English and it come out sounding normal.
I mean, I think French is a silly language anyway. Like, vowels are weird. Like, the word bird in French, oiseau, it's all vowels. Why? But I looked up what couche-tard translates to, and it means night owl, which I think is very cute for a convenience store company because all of my treks are in the dark hours. And the company's logo is a winking owl.
Okay, that helps sell it. I'm not going to lie. Sophia's like little parenthetical there should be with every news story about this.
Owl, not insult.
Oh.
I do agree it's cute, but also Pittsburgh already has its own famous owl logo. So now I'm wondering if are the Duolingo owl and the couche-tard owl going to have to battle it out? Because I think there's only room for one cutesy owl in this city.
Oh, I completely disagree.
Okay, overruled.
Yeah, I think we need to lean into it, get every company to turn into an owl, and we're Owl City.
Yeah, there's never a limit on how many companies in this town can have a mascot. I'm a full send. We're going to switch gears a little bit here. We wanted to take some time this morning to talk about COVID. Cases are surging here locally again, but not just here. This is happening all over.
Yeah, at this point, it seems like maybe the most reliable way to actually measure COVID rates is through the wastewater because, people just aren't testing the way they used to. The CDC tracks the level of the COVID-19 virus in wastewater. And right now, they're detecting high or very high levels in almost every state. So It's not just us, like you said. I looked at the map, and it seems especially bad in the South and the West. That's where you're seeing the big concentration of very high levels. But Pennsylvania levels are still high, and that's not true of all of our neighbors. West Virginia is moderate right now.
But what about us? Like Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, how are we doing?
Yeah, I didn't see that on the CDC map, but I did find our state health department has a dashboard tracking wastewater levels, and they look at 15-day trends. So there has been an increase in Allegheny County in the past 15 days, but it's still nowhere near the levels in like previous big spikes. Looking at that data, it seems like the last major spikes here were in January and March of 2023. But that being said, you can still see the line going up. It has been on the rise here since July. And that kind of tracks with my own personal experience. Like, I don't know about you, but maybe starting a few weeks ago, I just kept hearing from more and more people who had COVID, like both friends here in Pittsburgh and then also friends and family all over the country. It seemed like all of a sudden everybody was just falling ill.
Yeah, it hit me a few weeks ago.
Yeah, Sophia, you're one of those friends I mentioned I was thinking of.
But I also saw outlets like WUSA, Pittsburgh Magazine. They all recently had stories about the rise in cases like this week.
Yeah, I saw those too, and it seems like a big focus was on vaccination. So we are expecting a new vaccine in the fall. Health professionals are saying it's really important to get vaccinated, and the guidance is to wait for that new one so that it can protect against new COVID variants, because we are seeing some new variants right now.
Which sounds familiar. I feel like we just keep riding the same roller coaster over and over again. Like last year, I had to wait ages to have my kid vaccinated because he was old enough. He'd been cleared for it, but the new vaccine at the time like wasn't available yet, so they just had us leave him like sort of unprotected until we could get the most up-to-date one. It was fine, he was fine, but it was just like an extra layer of anxiety for a few months.
That is exactly where I am right now. My daughter became eligible to get vaccinated a couple months ago. Pediatrician is advising to wait for the new one. And it's just tough when we're waiting at the exact moment we're seeing this spike. It has made me very nervous, but I also understand wanting the best chance of protection eventually.
Yeah. I mean, and also hopefully the new vaccine rollout goes a little better this year. Last year, it felt kind of like the Wild West, trying to get an appointment and then feel confident that it would actually be covered by your insurance and it would actually happen as written. Like I showed up for one at one point and like they were like, oh, we're out. Sorry.
Right. It was so annoying. Like my experience was kind of similar, limited appointments. I think one of mine got canceled because they didn't have the vaccine, if I remember correctly. Like they just didn't have the
that.
number.
And the only reason you knew is because you called in advance after mine got canceled. I forgot.
I had a call because I also found out that, before I just walked into any pharmacy, but then last year was the first time like certain pharmacies were taking my insurance. So this year I will definitely be calling whenever I make my appointment just to make sure everything goes right.
And then calling right before your appointment to make sure that it will actually go on as scheduled.
Yeah, the hope is it'll be smoother this year, because the thing I'm remembering about last year was it was the first time the COVID vaccine was actually privatized, right? So it used to be you got it for free from the federal government. But then last year was the first time that pharmacies had to buy vaccines from suppliers and you had to go through your insurance company to get it. So it led to all these different headaches, the limited appointments you mentioned, Sophia. People would show up and get told their insurance didn't cover the vaccine, even though that wasn't accurate. But it had just taken pharmacies and insurance companies a while to work out all of the kinks, which led to a lot of nightmares. And so my hope is now that they've had a year under their belt, now that this is just the standard, it won't be as challenging as it was this time last year.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess regardless of smoothness, it's also just really important to take time to go get the vaccine, even if it is a pain to hunt it down. Pittsburgh Magazine reported that last year, only about 25% of people in the county got the COVID vaccine at all.
Whoa.
While twice as many of that got the flu shot. So they were going for vaccines. They just weren't going for the COVID one.
I didn't realize it was that low.
Yeah, that's also surprising to me, like that difference. I did both of mine at once, which sort of sucked, but, one and done.
I tried to do that, but I was literally 2 days early for the vaccine shipment for COVID, so I had to go back a few days later.
The first time that I got COVID and flu shot on the same day, I ended up getting the worst migraine of my life. I think it was just too much overload for my body. So ever since, I have made 2 separate appointments, which is annoying. I just don't want to run that risk again. But, if I can commit to the 2 trips, everybody else, you can commit to the 1 and get it done. Also, just a reminder, if you got vaccinated in the past, when the vaccine was first rolled out, or even more recently, like last year, that doesn't mean you're protected now. The immune protection starts to, drop after a while. And like I mentioned earlier, there's new variants going around. So it is really critical if you want that protection to re-up your vaccine.
Yeah, I don't know how y'all think about it, but I keep thinking in my head, like, the common cold is also a coronavirus, right? Like, I know it's not apples to apples because, like, nothing in virology is like that, but it just helps my brain make sense of how this stuff works and how I need to think about it to be able to protect myself. It's like, it changes. You need the new thing. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and when I'm thinking about protecting myself, I'm thinking about like other things I can do besides getting the vaccine too. Obviously, masking is a really big one, and I still mask a lot, especially in like indoor spaces like the grocery store, public transit, medical appointments, that kind of thing.
Sophia, you are so good about that. I scold myself literally every time I leave home without one, and I think of you.
I just have masks in all my bags, so I just don't forget. So, like, if I'm going to the library, I can pop one on. And, I've got one if I'm going to, like, a crowded space like a concert. And, of course, other mitigations. You can do events outside while it's still nice and before the Pittsburgh gray really sets in. Mm-hmm. Or get a high-quality air filter. The HEPA ones are great. There's a lot of recommendations online. I have a Levoit one. That one's nice and quiet, too.
I have one that lives in my closet in my office on standby. So she only like pops on every hour or so. It's also great for bad air quality days. Like whenever we get like an orange alert or worse, I put it in my kids' playroom or bedroom so that, if I'm going to protect anyone in my household, it's going to be them.
It also helps with my allergies. Like, these things are great for all sorts of things.
True.
And just one more COVID story before we jump that sort of relates to all of this. Friend of the pod and CityCast contributor Natalie Bencivenga did an interview with the dean of Pitt's School of Public Health about COVID's connections to climate change. That interview is in Public Source. We will drop a link in the show notes if you want a weekend read. Highly recommend it.
Yeah, I saw that too. There's a big focus on Allegheny County and how the stakes for us are especially high when it comes to respiratory illness because, Megan, like you said, we've got bad air quality. Mm-hmm. So I thought this was just really nice in terms of taking big issues and giving them local relevance. But do not worry, not all doom and gloom. The dean also talks about like some grants and research that's being done. And I like the note she ends on. It's, quote, "We know what to do. We just need to do it."
Você que está ouvindo o seu podcast, sabia que tudo que o Google faz tem a intenção de trazer impacto positivo? Como? O Jefferson da Tributei usou inteligência artificial para facilitar o dia a dia das empresas. Ele e milhares de empreendedores geraram mais de 188 bilhões com as plataformas do Google. E a Miriane se formou em UX com certificados profissionais do Google, criando o seu próprio negócio. Ela e 88% dos formados relataram avanços profissionais como promoção ou novo emprego. Tem que ser bom para todo mundo. Google.
Você que está ouvindo o seu podcast e curte fazer um bom negócio, vai aí uma dica imperdível. A nova Chevrolet S10 está na sua melhor versão, bruta e macia ao mesmo tempo. De um lado, toda a força e potência de uma picape bruta, invocada e conectada. Do outro, todo o conforto que só a nova suspensão proporciona, muito mais macia e silenciosa, deixando suas viagens ainda mais confortáveis. É a nova S10 que você conhece e confia, ainda mais bruta, brutalmente macia. Acesse chevrolet.com.br para saber mais.
Next up, the Democratic National Convention wrapped up last night. So both parties now have fully official candidates. I feel like we've all kind of known this for a while, but it's real now.
Yeah.
Trump and
For Harris
Vance.
Walz, less than a month, because how long ago was he even announced?
I mean, fair, but like it feels like a very long time,
Yes.
at least in here in Pennsylvania. So Trump and Vance for the Republicans and Harris and Walz for the Democrats. I feel like here we are the millionth people to say this, but there were large differences between the vibes of these two conventions.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the RNC kind of had the vibe that I think a lot of us would have been expecting. Obviously, there were some surprises, like Trump showing up with a bandage on his ear because he had just survived an assassination attempt, and then a bunch of people there replicating that look. But the talking points about defeating wokeism, deporting people waving mass deportation now signs, it was like, yeah, this is what I was expecting from the RNC. But I think a month ago, I could not have predicted a DNC with this level of energy and enthusiasm. And I think the key word has been hope. That was not the energy I was imagining at the DNC a month ago, but things, like we said, have changed so quickly.
Well, and I think in fairness, too, like the RNC was directly, like, I mean, gosh, like what, 2 days after the assassination attempt? So like, I will give it to them at least the beginning of the conference, like, no, nothing's going to feel normal or okay.
That's
if you're
fair.
If the person who's arriving there to like speak and the party is for him has just survived something like that. Like that's trippy, and it's gonna need to be serious for that reason.
Meanwhile, the DNC's roll call felt very unserious.
Yes, absolutely, which we will talk about. Just for the record, we're not going to walk through any policy stuff by and large. We just figured we would give you the highlights of what some Pittsburghers and Pennsylvania people who attended and attended each of them said while they were there. So where do you guys want to start? GOP or Democrats?
Catch us up on the GOP since that happened first.
Yes. So back in July, right after the assassination attempt, a couple key Republicans from the area that went that I think are worth talking about. So Erin Coper, she's an organizer in Elliott, so that's the West End, very active on X if you're interested in her. She got to give a proper speech on stage at the Republican National Convention, which is it's a little unusual for grassroots organizers to get that kind of platform.
Yeah.
So she says that she has had a front row seat to chaos, quote, caused by Democrats and their soft on crime policies, end quote. She specifically names Mayor Gainey, U.S. Representative Summer Lee, and Allegheny County Executive Sarah Innamorato as the reasons for this. She cites the county homicide rate here in 2022 as being at an all-time high, which fact check time was true, but that number fell significantly the following year in 2023. And that was true, like big highs in 2022, and then a precipitous fall the next year all over the country.
Right. That was a national trend.
Yeah. So if I knew that, I had forgotten it. But so most metro areas saw higher homicides and violent crime coming out of the pandemic, and then this huge drop in 23. And I have read several stories now about possible reasons why. So one huge piece was a piece of gun control legislation, the very first one passed federally in 28 years, called the Safer Communities Act, which gave states funding for red flag laws, crisis intervention programs, and ways to prosecute arms trafficking and straw purchases of guns. So I think like that is not to be discounted.
Right. Absolutely.
Then another claim. So she talks about Pittsburgh police having way fewer officers, but she does not mention on stage why. We will crunch her numbers first. So she says 991 officers in 2020 to 750 at the end of 2023. So 991 to 750. That was close to true, but the end of year count was actually 772 on staff, so a little higher than she had. Plus, they had 45 people in the academy at the time. So it's a little numbers heavy, but that number would have been, like, by the end of 23, 817. Now, so year and a half later, we're up to 872 Pittsburgh police officers, and we're only budgeted for 850. So to me, that tells me that, like, we're already a little bit above where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, and I mean, the last I heard, I think the city wants to hire more than that.
Yeah, I mean, Gainey's goals right now, last we heard, were 875 officers. So three more people between now and 2026. And then having the budget back up to 900 in 2027. So I think that's like important to keep in mind that the Democratic mayor that they're mad at actually is thinking about this and has goals in place. And then just very briefly, the why behind why officers went down. There were an enormous amount of retirements, which again, I think is a thing we've seen nationally.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, in kind of any field, I feel like it's important to check how much numbers are being affected by retirements, because I think that's leading to shortages across industries right now.
Yeah. And then the academy, too, was also like put on pause during the pandemic. I don't know if y'all remember, but when we talked to Larry Scurato last year, when he was just taking over the department, he was like, yeah, getting the academy back online is something I'm like really, really excited about. And they've since had a class graduate. And I think if they haven't started a new one, they're about to.
So what else happened during the GOP's convention?
So sticking with the Republicans, one more name to give you, Dave McCormick, who is no stranger to running for office here in Pennsylvania. Right now, he is running to replace three-term Senator Bob Casey Jr. He has a ton of money, and his commercials are all over the place right now, so I will let his promises, his goals speak for themselves. But he mostly talked about how important this moment is, acknowledged loss of life at the Trump rally, and then he had this moment where he said Casey has been around, which from the way he says it suggests in office, quote, so long that the Macarena was number one, which just sort of sent me because I remember doing the Macarena at a school assembly when I was very, very young. Mallory, I can see you typing over there.
I'm fact checking because it's like possible he was.
Well, so I thought the same thing. Casey took office in 2007 and the Macarena was number one.
Okay, that was well past the Macarenas.
No, the Macarena was number one in 1996.
That way I can't date Casey's start, but I can date all hit songs by whether or not they happened before my bar mitzvah. Like, were they part of the bar mitzvah dance scene? Macarena was not. Gotta predate 1999.
In McCormick's defense, it's possible maybe he meant since like Casey popped on the scene in Pennsylvania. He did run for Auditor General in 1996. But I looked up McCormick's record too, and he's been in government or seeking office since 2005. That he was a Bush administration commerce secretary. So before Casey was a Pennsylvania senator. Anyway, all this made me giggle.
So, okay, let's talk about the DNC now. I mostly have thoughts on the roll call because I keep seeing clips of that on TikTok. But, tell us more about how Pennsylvania got represented.
You know what? I can't express to you how relevant everything you just said is. So actually, let's pause for the roll call. The Republicans stayed normal. Roll calls for both parties are always so wildly boring. I cannot emphasize that enough as somebody who I'm a nerd and watches these things every year.
2020 was kind of special when people had to do it from their video in and do it from their actual home states. That was beautiful. I wish they would have kept that tradition alive.
That was better than usual. I think the Dems, I would argue, sort of recreated the vibe. The Democrats is basically a dance party, in case you've missed that. Here's a clip, actually, of Pennsylvania's that we snagged from the DNC's YouTube. Please note the music.
Party people in the place to be. We're now passing the mic at the DNC. It goes 1, 2, 3, let's go!
The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. How do you cast your vote?
Let's go, Pennsylvania, let's go! My name is Mayor DeJuan Walker from the great city of Aliquippa, Beaver County. My city's a city of legends, the only high school in America with 3 Hall of Famers. I took this seat in 2009 when my sister was murdered. I wanted to do better. 15 years she's been gone. 12 years this city has been under my watch. I'm grateful for the opportunity to lead my city. I'm grateful for the state of Pennsylvania. God bless everyone in this room. I love this state. Thank you.
Remember here, VP candidate Tim Walz just visited Aliquippa.
I'm Governor Josh Shapiro. The proud governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the birthplace of democracy, the birthplace of freedom, the greatest Commonwealth of all. And together, Pennsylvania cast 178 votes for the next Madam President of the United States, Kamala Harris, and Vice President Tim Walz.
I think Shapiro learned he needs to bring that football coach energy to the national stage because that Tim Walz really sounds like
really
he's on
had
the
like
field.
some sportscaster energy there, like the call out officials. Just in case you're not familiar with the convention's party delegates, like the votes he's talking about are how they officially choose candidates. In the modern era, it's like barely real, but it used to be. If you want to look up how that stuff used to work, I just love that he says we're the best Commonwealth. Like I don't know why we're coming for Kentucky and Virginia like that.
There aren't that many Commonwealths. We don't need to fight.
I know that really feels like a personal attack when the number is so small.
Anyway, I will quickly run through the Democrats who made an appearance. The list is longer because it includes our city, county, state leadership. Like right now, Pennsylvania is just extremely Democratic heavy. Mayor Gainey and his wife, Michelle, he's been posting videos of her dancing, which I think are really cute. Jake Wheatley, Mayor Gainey's chief of staff, the county executive, Sarah Innamorato, and her whole team, Representative Summer Lee, who went to Woodland Hills High School here, Josh Shapiro, and Lieutenant Governor Austin Davis. They both got primetime speaking spots. So Davis's was on Monday, Shapiro on Wednesday. Davis's mic started off really hot, which I think is just unfair. But he talked very, very briefly about safe roads, safe bridges, safe air, and safe drinking water, which I think we can all say Pennsylvanians care about a whole lot.
Yep.
We don't all have it. We don't have all of it, but we all care about it.
Exactly.
We want it.
And maybe I'm just really used to hearing Shapiro speak because, like, nothing he said struck me as out of the ordinary. But, like, you can hear in that clip of the delegate count, the roll call, he got so much applause. Like, good gravy, people responded to him.
Yeah, kind of the coverage I've seen coming out of this is that he, is really keeping this forward momentum going that he had before he did not become the pick, and that he's really like bringing that enthusiasm for Harris Walsh, but also,
like using it to promote Pennsylvania too.
Yeah.
And maybe positioning himself for a future run as well.
Probably.
Yes, exactly.
I don't think we ever throw that one completely off the table. I got tickled, Mallory, you would appreciate this. Shapiro spared a line for great public schools.
That one really struck me when that was one of the, we still don't have the full story of why he wasn't the choice, but his support of school vouchers and the way public school advocates framed him as being anti-public education, I was very surprised to hear him shout out public schools as part of his speech. That was not a super long speech.
Yeah, and the vouchers thing, gosh, that was almost a year and a half ago. So it's possible he's adjusted course since then. He also hit his other usual notes like LGBTQIA rights, abortion is healthcare, supporting police and community intervention. He always puts it in the same phrase. And then, of course, PA's role as the birthplace of democracy and also what we mean as a modern swing state. And then they also had a bunch of delegates. None of them got primetime space like Aaron did for the RNC, but the youngest one, for example, was 21. And she told KDKA that the party really has to keep pushing their message on TikTok. Sophia, I will let you have that one.
Well, that was the awkward part of Shapiro's speech when he said something like, we need to do this work in the streets and on our For You page.
Yes.
that didn't go over too well, but yes, Sophia, young person's take on all of this.
Honestly, I haven't checked up on Governor Shapiro's TikTok page in a while. This is a good reminder to do that.
Okay, one more story celebrating our region. There is a milestone birthday coming up for Point State Park. It is the 50th anniversary of the park, which means it's Golden Jubilee.
That is such a fancy name. If you're a newsletter subscriber, you may have seen some trivia questions about the park, and I actually learned a lot from these very short questions. I did not know that the area where the park is now used to be super focused on industry before becoming a commercial slum.
Sophia, it sounds a lot like you're about to give away a bunch of spoilers to this week's news quiz.
Yeah, I'm about to give a bunch of quiz spoilers, so if you want to take that first, pause the podcast and head over to pittsburgh.citycast.fm or keep listening and get a higher score.
Okay.
Sophia supports cheating. We learned that.
That's true. I forgot.
with our past news quiz.
I'm going to give everyone one more second. Last chance to skip this part or cheat. Okay. Everyone here's a cheater now. So my favorite thing I learned about the point is that there once was a roller coaster on the edge of the Allegheny River there.
I'm really disappointed that that's not still there. That would be so delightful.
Bring it back for the 60th anniversary.
Yes, please bring that coaster back. City Paper did a really nice article looking at the history of the park. It's what we're going to draw on a lot here. The Seneca and Shawnee originally settled that land, and the area was an important spot in the French and Indian War. Of course, Fort Pitt is still marked there with the stone outline, and the Fort Pitt Blockhouse is now a museum, a really great museum you can go visit if you want to learn more.
Yeah, I don't know if they still have it. It's been a little while since I've been down there, but they had this really detailed diorama that sort of shows the land as it was in its earlier days. The shoreline, I think, is what sticks out to me the most. Like, it's just so neat to see it represented and get a sense of how we've literally physically changed the outlines of our city over time.
But the points had many lives. It also got filled with warehouses. A railroad station was there. There have been houses, all sorts of things besides, the big green open space that we see there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I'm spoiling the quiz here, but Frank Lloyd Wright had a lot to do with what it became. He had some big ideas for what the point should look like. A lot of it was very car-centric. But many of his ideas did influence what the park looks like today. For example, the fountain.
Yes, the big feature of the whole thing. And today, the park is managed by the DCNR. They say that when the park and fountain opened up in 1974, it was one of the world's tallest fountains. And it is really big. Like, the water shoots up 150 feet in the air, and it's at a rate of 1.2 million gallons per hour. I really cannot fathom how much water that is, honestly.
No,
anyway, I like the fountain, and I guess a lot of other people do too, because the point gets about 1.5 million visitors annually. That's all according to the state.
I can't express how much time Hey Pittsburgh editor Francesca DeBecco and I spent trying to fact check that number.
Oh.
We had a devil of a time. That is what the state reports. But outlets report all kinds of different numbers because you kind of have to estimate, right? Like attendance at a state park where there's no like admission or anything. But yes, suffice it to say, a lot of people go there.
It's always listed as one of Pennsylvania's most popular parks. I'm sure that, just being part of a big city helps its numbers, but yay us.
Well, if you're thinking about making a trip to the Point, you should go next Friday because that is the official birthday. The event on the DCNR's website is called Happy Birthday Fountain. So cute. That sounds like the title of a children's book.
It does.
It's going to be from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. and totally free. So just show up and you can learn a little bit more about the fountain beyond what we've told you here.
Totally. Well, last but never least, as we're heading into the weekend, what will each of you be thinking about? Sophia, you first.
I'm thinking about the nurses at West Penn Hospital because earlier this week, the union authorized the strike. So they aren't on strike at this moment, but this means they're saying they're willing to strike if their demands aren't met. So one big thing is higher wages, and nurses at Allegheny General Hospital won wage increases and other benefits last year. So nurses at West Penn are saying, the standard should be met with all the other hospitals in the area. And there's this big nursing shortage in Pennsylvania right now. And nurses are saying that higher wages will help with retaining senior nurses and getting new staff. So hopefully, if those demands are met, we'll have more nurses. So I guess we'll just see what happens next.
I'll go next. I have also been watching some strike news. There have been a couple updates with the Post-Gazette strike. So as a reminder, workers at the PG have been on strike since October of 2022. So that is almost 2 years.
So long.
I think it's actually now being recognized as the city's longest strike ever, like any kind of labor strike, which is wild.
Yeah, and as far as I could tell, I think it's also maybe the longest newspaper strike of all time. Like, I couldn't find anything definitive, but I couldn't find a record of a strike that's last longer. It seems like there was a big one in Detroit that was 18 months-ish, 19 months. So, yes, the strike has been happening for a long time. It started when the paper changed its health insurance plan so that some workers say they were paying more for less coverage. But there's also just been a lot of dissatisfaction about a number of issues, including pay. There has not been an across-the-board pay raise in the newsroom for almost 20 years. So as I understand it, individuals have gotten raises, but there hasn't been, a standard increase for everybody. All that to say, last week, the National Labor Relations Board, the NLRB, asked for an injunction forcing the paper to take back the striking workers, to cover the higher cost of health insurance, and to bargain in good faith. But leaders at the Post-Gazette say there's a discrepancy here because earlier in the summer, the NLRB said, yes, the Post-Gazette failed to bargain in good faith, but they were within their right to change the health insurance plan.
which we should remember was the impetus for the entire strike. So when all of this first shook out, it was just a couple of unions in play, but all 5 unions were required to strike if any one of them did. I think we should remember, too, the NLRB ruling about the company being able to change its health insurance plan, that was just for one complaint. So each union filed complaints separately, all 5 of them. One of them has since dissolved. They decided to resolve their strike, but it meant also dissolving the union. So there are still 3 more complaints pending. It stands to reason that the labor board might rule similarly for the others, but I don't think there's any way for us to know that for sure.
So anyway, now Post-Gazette lawyers are saying that this injunction conflicts with that one ruling in July. The injunction is headed to a judge now. None of this is fully settled yet, but it is something that we'll continue to follow and see, does this actually get to the 2-year mark?
Yeah.
Definitely. Megan, what about you? What are you thinking about?
Mine is breezy or breezier. The Pittsburgh Symphony Orchestra is kicking off its European tour this week.
Ooh.
I always forget that they do this, but it happens, I think, almost every year. So lots of stops in Germany, in Austria, one spot in Italy. They've been doing this for a long time. I saw conductor Manfred Honeck quoted somewhere saying that this is not a nice to have thing that they do, that it's literally he's contractually obligated to go on these trips.
Okay, sure. Like, I get that this is still part of a job. It's not just a relaxing vacation. But if CityCast said, go hang out in Germany, Austria, and Italy, I would be there happily.
It is a working trip. Like, they have to perform and stuff there. But they're doing this thing that they call, quote, baton diplomacy, where a bunch of, like, business executives and stuff are going to try to, like, work on collaborations and stuff like that about how, like, maybe Pittsburgh might be a good place to set up shop, that kind of thing. Every once in a while they get some criticism because, like, this whole thing is, like, really expensive and has, like, a pretty massive carbon footprint because of the planes and how much they have to pack up to make it happen, all of that. But it's also, like, really prestigious because so often, like, all of these are, like, festivals and other things. And Pittsburgh, they're all by invitation. And Pittsburgh is often the only American symphony invited. So we are
didn't realize
quite good.
that.
Yeah, we're quite renowned. Anyway, Sophia, all of this ties into that whole sister city relationship that you and I have talked about going back a while. So if any of y'all are curious what it means for Pittsburgh to have a sister, we will link that episode in the show notes.
Yeah, it doesn't always mean what you think it means.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. Our music is by Benji. Mallory Falk is our executive producer. Sophia Lowe, Francisco Kilgore, and Selena C.A. Reynolds produced the show. Francesca DeBecco and Selena wrote our newsletter. And I'm your host, Megan Harris. We'll be back on Monday with more news from around the city. Have a great weekend, everyone.
I need to see if someone has ranked every single song used for the roll call. I've seen, like, the mega list, but I need a ranking of why things worked and why things didn't.
I just think Pennsylvanians is a chicken move because we picked 2.